Welcome back, guys, to the fitness podcast. We're one man down today. Nathan is in Ibiza, so as you can expect, he is nowhere near TBC. It's me and Emily today, who are going to be taking over. So today we're going to be
What do you mean
discussing.
taking over? We've been
We're
here since,
always taking
I
over.
have not missed a single podcast since I came on the second show. I've been
Wait,
home.
really?
I've been home. I'm the most reliable person we've got in this team.
No, no, hold on. Yeah, you probably are because I missed one. I think I remember. Um, Oh wow, yeah. Shout out to Emily. Give her a round of big applause. But let's dive deep into our main topic for today, which is like we've seen this with a lot of clients. We've probably gone through it maybe ourselves, which is we're going to cover this in two parts, right? And they're probably interlinked anyway, which is the all or nothing mentality and should you always be dieting is one of the biggest ones, especially like recently I've seen a lot more through probably social media. I know social media is always going to kind of play a part, but let's start with the all or nothing mentality. Emily, what have you seen with clients like who've had the all or nothing mentality? And again, the pros and cons, I guess we can kind of discuss for both.
I mean, I would want to argue that 95% of the people that we take on probably have an all or nothing mentality,
Yeah.
partly because that's how society has been shaping us, right? Um, and Yeah, I mean, the pros of having the all or nothing mentality really is that if you are always all, you're going to get anything that you want and you're going to get it really fast. But the question really is, what happens then when you can't be all and then you go to the nothing and it becomes this destructive cycle where you just go in this all nothing, and you actually leads you nowhere. And I mean, it leads you to despair, I would say. Uh, and Yeah, so I mean, I talk a lot about the all or nothing mentality and really trying to break away what that means to people, and then trying to understand that we all have these different types of energies and powers that sometimes we can switch on, but we have to understand that sometimes the switching off is actually a good thing as well. Um, so yeah, and I've seen this in myself as well, right? The all or nothing.
I was actually going to ask. I was going to be like, so do you feel like you've gone through it yourself, like in a manner where let's discuss your own experiences because I think it's quite cool because like do you think you've evolved from that and you're like actually I'm not the all or nothing person now, or because I think most fitness professionals are all or nothing as well to a large extent, in my opinion. So let's go through our own experiences and then we can kind of dissect it. So yeah, let's discuss your one.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I've been the all or nothing person. But I think it's also part of trying to find who you are, right? Where you go so directly in one direction and you give everything, and you submerge yourself with what you're doing. Um, and then at some point maybe it becomes destructive. Like, I know it's been destructive for me and for my health if we're going purely looking body composition wise, right? There was a time when I trained 6 days a week and I was dieting really hard and I was working 70 hours a week and I was trying to do it all. And then on top of that, I tried to have a personal life. And so that, and actually trying to do it all, it became to the destruction of my health, like physically and mentally. So I think it was at that point when I was really starting to question everything. And I'm so far away from the all approach. Now I have a lot of energy when I work on things. So that's a different thing, right? But
Yeah.
I'm also fully aware that I need to now learn. I'm learning how to be more like waves rather than like fire, even though I have a fiery personality. Um, I'm okay with not always being the best. I'm okay with having to take time off. I'm okay with not being perfect in my diet. I'm okay with all of these things. I'm okay with getting fatter. I'm okay with getting leaner. I'm just okay with everything. But then
Do you,
just tuning in with what do I want to achieve right now.
yeah. But do you think that came through because you had to go through that all mentality? Because otherwise, like I've never seen someone who's not had the all or nothing mentality suddenly is like, they don't flip to the other side, I feel. So do you feel like you had to go through that? It's like effectively like, with training, you need to go to failure to know what failure looks like. Is that the same thing do you feel like for you?
Well, yeah, life is your greatest teacher, right? You don't know unless
Yeah.
you've actually experienced something. So I mean, I didn't hit the wall, so I can't say that I went all the way, because I think when you go all the way, you hit the wall. But I would probably was quite close to it. Um, and yeah, so I mean, yeah, yes, and also then understanding that then you can appreciate the power that you have within yourself to go all when you have specific tasks, or you have a goal, or you set some deadlines. But then it's the what happens if you're not perfect? Like, what do you do then? And I've just done way too much personal development to just go and see this as something that is inherently wrong with me. Instead, I start to look for other answers that isn't me. It can be
Mhm.
structure, it can be planning, it can be all of these things, but it is not me. And I think that's made a big difference for me in terms of shifting my all or nothing approach. Because, yeah, as I said, like, it's a very powerful force to have, but it only lasts you short term.
But do you feel like it's benefited you in other areas of your life, potentially being all or nothing,
Uh,
away from fitness? Let's say let's not even go over it. Fitness is one part of it, but like, do you feel like any other area of your life you're like quite all or nothing, and it's actually yielded a lot of return?
no, I don't think that it's how you want to live life with the all approach. Because when you put so much energy in one area, you neglect other
Um,
areas.
yeah.
So if you go into relationship and you are so focused on this relationship, you start to neglect other relationships, or you start to neglect your own hobbies. If you do this in business, same, you might have to neglect time for yourself, for your health, for your well-being. So I don't believe in the all or nothing, in that for it to be sustainable and healthy. Like because I always come back to health. And no, I don't believe that the all approach is key to health. It's key to quick success short term. But if we don't learn how to sustain something, whether it's relationships, health, fitness, body composition, business, it's still going to break down at some point, and you do not know what to do with yourself if you don't know how to actually maneuver that. That's
Mm.
at least my belief. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, what are your beliefs? What are your
I think so. If I'm going to go with the fitness viewpoint, like I've seen clients have the all or nothing mentality, and what I've realized is they do really well with just quote unquote the fat loss phase. And it's the next phase where it's not necessarily, you can't really see it too much, right? The being in shape and maintaining and so on, like you can't always see that. Yeah, you can see I'm maintaining abs, but for them they really struggle with that. I had this one client, like, and he came from like another coach, and I could tell he had the all or nothing mentality straight away. I could just tell. And he went from like, he got an amazing condition. He sent me the pictures like, look, I got an amazing condition, like this coach, whatever. I was like, that's amazing. Like, but what happened, all that kind of stuff. That's another story. He gained 25 kilos after, because he had such a all or nothing mentality for that fat loss phase. He couldn't care less about maintaining. He couldn't care less about anything else after. He was just like, I'm all in for this fat. Like, they're the ones who typically come to you and like, I can't wait for this result. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this result. And you're just like, all
yeah,
right.
what do you do with that? I think that's interesting, because
Yeah.
I sit people down initially and I say, let's have an actual talk here. Uh,
I have a talk. Well, in the initial call like that we have, it's very much like, look, that all or nothing. I literally firstly tell them that they've got this all or nothing mentality, because sometimes awareness is just huge, right? If they're not aware of like, oh yeah, I'm actually like this, they don't know, right? If no one's ever pointed it out to them, because everyone else may like actually celebrate that with them. They're like, man, you're such a hardworking person, whatever. But then reality is like, from a fitness standpoint, it doesn't really work. So I'm always like, look, you can be all or nothing, which by the way, the pros to this is you're going to get good results, but it's after you're going to really be in a really shitty situation. If they've already failed, quote unquote, and they've learned from that, they'll just be like, okay, cool, I need to stop doing this all or nothing style. But sometimes it just comes to talking to them, having that discussion. And again, discussion yields, conversation, creates a back and forth, which then, they may defend it. They may be like, no, I need to have this all or nothing mentality because of this, fine. There's always two sides to the story, but my side to this will always be like, what's the positive if you've already been in shape for the future, because you're only going to go back in the same place, right? If you think about the juice fast, the whole keto, paleo, Atkins diet from early 2000s people have done, that was all about all or nothing, right? Because it was all about, I'm going to do this for a short period of time. Maybe because obviously you blame both parties, right? You blame um, the fitness industry because that's what they were selling. Then you also blame the client because that's what they're buying, right? It's a whole, like, it's similar to like drugs effectively. So you look at it from that standpoint and you're like, okay, they've already had that all or nothing mentality. Now people are kind of flipping to the other side, which is like, look, I know this is going to be a long-term thing. Like, people come to me now and they're like, I know this is going to be long-term. So talk me through what's going to happen in a year, 2 years time, potentially. Right. So people are graduating from that whole, like, look, I've done it in the past. Someone who's never dieted down, I realized there's also people who never dieted down can also have this all or nothing mentality. It's like, I need to be in shape for whatever reason, or I want to get there in 12 weeks. And it's like, 12-week transformations are dead. Pretty much they're dead right now. No, not a lot of people can get 12 weeks unless you're super lean. You're carrying minimum body fat, then yeah, you can get there in 12 weeks.
I
So
never did a 12-week trial. Mine was the shortest one I ever did was 14 weeks.
yeah, even my shortest one has probably been about 16, 17 weeks.
And that
Um,
14-week one was when I actually fucking killed myself in the process. So, if I were to do it now, I mean, technically I have a photo shoot in 14 weeks. So technically this is the time to start. But yeah, but that just also goes to show that if someone like you and I who actually understand nutrition, and also bear in mind that people don't realize the amount of learnings that it is to be had, especially if you've never done this before.
yep.
Like if you've never even thought about what protein is and what a kitchen scale is, and planning your week according to your habits, all of a sudden, that only the time to actually understand that it's like a third of your transformation journey.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that education you get from a transformation is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And that takes time, right? It's like, it's anything in life, right? I think, if I did a course in something right now, if I'm actually scared of courses that says like it's a 6-week deadline or whatever. I'm just like, what am I going to learn in 6 weeks? If I'm being honest with you, or even to an extent, like says 12 weeks, right? Because I don't really learn too much. Like, I learned something in 12 weeks, but it's not enough for me to be like, I'm now an expert at this, right? Because if you want to do things with fitness, like, you want to do this once really well, and eventually you go out there and do it yourself potentially. And again, use those learnings that you had in that experience, in that journey, that will allow you to then flourish in the future. A lot of people don't realize that. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this like in that. It's a very singular focus, which I like, right? Like, singular focus is great, but it's a detriment because you do ignore every other thing. Because people think they're not going to have birthday parties, they think they're not going to have anything going on, and as soon as they're also the ones who, like, let's say, have their birthday party and they have something that's potentially on their plan, or they've not taken their Tupperware or whatever, they feel like they need to take a Tupperware. Suddenly they're like, oh yeah, crap, I've had a birthday party, I've messed things up, I've failed completely, right? I've dealt with those type of people, and they're the ones who really, really, really struggle with the whole element of like actually, this is part of my lifestyle. So they never see a lifestyle, just see this like a phase of, like, it's part of their life. It's like every other summer I'm going to do this or whatever. Because, and they're also the ones who are guilty of, like, getting in, I want to get in shape for a holiday, right? And that's also another big conversation we can have later, probably in this podcast. Is like, should you always be dieting down for, like, even holidays, right? Because a lot of people always do that. They was like, oh, I need to diet down for a holiday. It's like, do you always need to diet down for a holiday? That's another subject in itself, right? But yeah, I think and then you said obviously you've come away from this all or nothing mindset yourself. Like, what steps did you have to take? Was it just personal development and awareness, or was it just like, someone telling you, like, as well, like, hey Emily, I think this is not great for you.
I mean, I must say life told me pretty harshly, like it was a slap in the face. Actually, it was probably a fist in the face. Um,
That's a
and
punch.
that, yeah, but yeah, but that's when I realized, it's actually time to take responsibility and make some changes to how I view performance and how I show up with what I show up with in terms of with my training, and also just understanding the allostatic stress load.
Hmm.
Because it comes down to that, right? You can be a fucking high performing motherfucker. There's a fucking fly. Sorry, it's a fly flying around here for the people listening. But you can be a high performer, right? But you have to then understand the equation of also then the allostatic stress. How much can you recover from? Because if you then manage that, you have so much more to give. But if you don't manage it, so that's the thing. And then that's, I think, what was the difference that made the difference between my preps. It's that I started focusing much more on my recovery
Mm.
and the how do I manage what I stress my body and my mind and my emotions with. And then also bringing it back to like, what do I believe in? What do I stand for? What am I willing to take? What am I not willing to take? And actually making more congruent choices with who I want to be and how I want my life to live, which then means excluding people from my life. It means stepping away from certain projects. All of a sudden I started making decisions based off how I wanted my life to be rather than what I believed other people wanted from me. And it makes a huge difference to my life. Because then it's easy to say no, because if we don't know what we stand for and what we want, it's so easy to say yes. And I'm a yes sayer still, but I know when to say no. I know who not to associate myself with, because I need to preserve the person, like need to preserve my energy so that I can actually be a high performer.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that as well, right? It's like all or nothing is not just in fitness, but it's also in life. Like you say yes to everything you want to go out to. Like every social, you were like, yes, I'm going to go to that. I'm going to go to that. Go to that. It's just a detriment potentially to your health, right?
Yeah, and every time you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. And oftentimes people don't realize, and I find this especially true with women, that we say yes to please others because it's how we've been conditioned through DNA in generations. But we don't then realize that we're saying no to ourselves.
Mm.
And I completely appreciate that, like being a mother and a wife, and then having parents that are sick, like often it falls on the woman, often.
Yeah, most time.
Yeah, but then it's still our own responsibility to preserve what we have, and understanding that at some point we have to teach other what we need to have help with. We need to actually ask for help, and we also need to be able to say no,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, agree.
Because we're by nature, and I'm generalizing heavily, saying us women, but as a breed, we tend to be more caring and actually caring about others and how others' well-being. But oftentimes, we are the last person whose needs are being met. So
Mm-hmm.
the moment you start to be a bit more selfish, you actually can be a bit more selfless. That's how I see it. But it's a shift in perception. It's a shift in mindset. Um, so yeah,
It's
but
true though.
like come back to me when I'm married and I have 3 kids and I'm like having sick parents. I touch on wood that they don't. But you know what I mean? Like I'll come back and talk about it in like 15 years time.
My bad.
That would be awesome to have a let's revisit that time when you said this.
Yeah,
Um,
I've written it down here, so we'll do it. But I was gonna basically, because I've seen it with women as well. I've coached like hundreds of women now, and I've seen it because they come to us looking to change once again, because they're like, I've gone through a period where look, I'm not looking after my physique. It's been 10, 15 years. I've got married, I've got kids, and I've never looked after myself now. And you're not wrong there. Basically, what you mentioned is true, because I've had women
I've,
tell me the same thing.
I've
Yeah,
coached hundreds of women too, so I
yeah,
know it by
exactly.
practice, right? And I see it everywhere.
Yeah, 100%. And what would you say to someone who is, let's say, has a conversation with you right now, and they're like, Emily, I want to get like, do you? I don't feel like you attract those type of people, but like, let's say if you did, and you got the odd one in there, and like, just went in there, like, look, Emily, I've got 12 weeks, I want to get in amazing shape. Okay, what would happen? How would you have that conversation with someone?
Well, I want to understand why, and I need to like the way that I take people on. It's very complex these days because there's a lot of things I want to know, and then I'll be realistic and I'll actually send people away. If I say, look, I don't think this is how I coach people. It's not really what I stand for. And this is the thing as well. I've learned to say no to people that I don't think that I'm going to be working well with, because I
Mhm.
understand that their agenda and my agenda, even though my agenda is to help them, if I can't deliver what they want in that instant moment, they're not going to be happy. But if I can get them to understand that you can get to this result, but it's not going to be this quick fix, then I still win, because that means that I have an impact on someone who might have the mentality that actually becomes destructive and is in this vicious cycle. So I don't get a lot of people with short deadlines because I just don't attract those kind of people anymore. Um, so yeah, I mean I have no problem to turning people away if what they want doesn't match with what I do, because I'm not going to sit there and bullshit them and say yeah, and then I bring them in and then I don't deliver.
And they
So
want to quit, yeah, after
yeah.
like 4 weeks. Yeah.
So,
It's same thing with, like, I probably had one consultation in the last 3 months where someone was really like after a quick fix. And I had to deny that person as well. I just tell them like, look, this ain't gonna be right for us. He was upset. I'm not gonna lie, like he was super upset, and he was shocked as well. At the same time, he was like, "I've never had a PT like turning me down or whatever." And he's had like maybe 3 PTs, and I'm like, "We're not firstly a PT, we're an online coaching company, so things are a bit different over here, and we choose who we want to work with." And he was like, "Oh, I want to, I want to get in shape, but like, but what can you do in 6 weeks for me?" I was like, I don't know. 6 weeks is 6 weeks. 6 weeks is not enough for you to see physical changes. Like if you're weight, and he was telling me scale weight, whatever, and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, look, it will take you way longer than this, right? You could be within there maybe 6 months potentially. And he was just shocked. And that's the thing. It's like sometimes people pander to people, which is I also find like it contributes to that all or nothing mentality, right? So if you're let's say if you're that person trainer, yeah, let's do it, man. 6 weeks time, we're gonna get you in amazing condition. Then you've only enabled that all or nothing mentality for that individual. So I
Yeah.
think sometimes it's also our job as coaches and as the wider industry to realize like this is how, if we want to coach one way, then coach that way. Don't try and, we spoke about fitness titans last week, right? So it kind of ties in nicely to that as well. It's like, we sometimes contribute to that all or nothing mentality with people as well, because we post, let's get you in amazing condition in 8 weeks, or let's get you in amazing condition 12 weeks. And people are like, yeah, oh my God, I have to do this in 12 weeks time, which, we know it's not going to be always 12 weeks. Like I haven't had a 12-week transformation since 2019, I think, or 2020, or early last year. But like it's one in like, it takes ages for most people, as we mentioned as well. So yeah, what tips would you give someone who is potentially like listening to this and like, damn, actually I do have an all or nothing mentality? What tips would you give someone right now to say, look, because it's not a bad thing to have all or nothing mentality, but it's just like it's making those few subtle tweaks which can then really change your journey effectively. So what would you say to them?
Well, I would first of all just ask, does what you're currently doing makes you happy?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if we are taking action towards things that makes us happy and actually is happiness, and not like, if then I'm happy and only at that point I'm happy. It's the same as having a gray zone for your physique. Like you can be happy at being 6% and you can be happy at being 12. That happiness shouldn't be more or less depending if you're a little bit higher or a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just question, what are the intents of all of this? Like, what is it? What do you believe it's going to give you in terms of an emotional investment? Because it's all about emotions at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um,
Not wrong.
and then also, like, what are the trade-offs of you having this? And I actually asked yourself, like, what do I see in my life that now has become like a trade-off for my all or nothing approach? What happens to the rest of my life if I focus purely on my physique for 12 weeks, which is not a bad thing. We don't want to say that it's a bad thing to sharpen your focus and to really not like dial it in and work with someone, because also that's the thing, if you're investing in working with a coach, you want to be invested, but
Yep.
there is a difference between being invested in a process and having the all or nothing mentality,
Yeah.
because
I
these are the
100%.
clients who won't check in with you when they're doing a bad thing, and they will only check in when they're doing a good thing. So like, if you're investing, be invested for the whole thing, and just kind of like trust that I have someone in my corner that, regardless if I so quote unquote fuck up or not, because I don't see anything as fuck ups. I see everything as movement, and we learn from what we're doing, and that's movement and that's progress. In my school of thought, that's progress. Whether it's not see like a visual thing on the scale or not, I think we're always progressing, but that's something that we then need to open up our minds to be receptive to, right? Instead of going, this is good, this is bad, let's just look at it and go, what are we learning here? So yeah, so my advice would just be that to question, just to question if you are happy, and if what you've done in the past with your all or nothing approach has been sustainable and has led you to keep to maintain that level of happiness that you achieved for that short term. Because if it didn't, it's something that needs to change, right?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Because I think always ask yourself why. I think is the biggest things. Like why am I like this? Like why am I always like I want to go all in, and then after that it's like I go through this, like I go through the highs of the high, and then I go through like a massive low, and I never recover from that low, and then again I want that high again. I guess it's a high of it, right? So getting into amazing shape quick in a quick manner, you do get a high from it. So you gotta ask yourself that question, and just fundamentally, it's similar to like your fat loss goal. One of the questions you may get was asked is like, what is your why towards your journey? You got to ask yourself that same question before you start the journey, which is like, why do I have this all or nothing mentality? And as me and Em mentioned, it's not a bad mentality to have, right? I'd rather like some people have that mentality than like the nothing mentality, like just do nothing. So I think it's not a bad thing, but just making it work for yourself, making sure there's no like, if there is this all or nothing mentality for just for 12 weeks, there's going to be some sort of pushback somewhere else in your life. Is that relationships? Is that do you think it's going to make you happy? So I do think that's going to be very, very important. But that kind of ties us nicely into like the next kind of part to this into the podcast, which is, should you always be dieting? Because we've like, and again, I work with people who've been like, yeah, I've been dieting like every other year or every summer. I've been working up to it. Like, we spoke about holidays just before, like during our all or nothing mentality segment, and we are like, some people always just diet down for every holiday. It's like, the question is, should you always be dieting? And Emily, obviously, you've gone through several diets as well, but that's the big question. Let's go for it.
I mean, we can just give them the answer no and cut this podcast short
Cut,
now.
yeah,
Just
cut,
kidding.
yeah, done, basically.
But no, the short answer is no. You shouldn't always be dieting. Dieting is a short-term thing. Well, it can be more of a long-term thing depending on where your starting point is. But dieting shouldn't be something that we obsess about in our life, right? There's one thing about starting something like working with a coach, you're going through a transformation journey. There needs to be a place where you reach some level of like equilibrium, and you have that gray zone where you can happily fluctuate between, and therefore you shouldn't have the diet mentality anymore, right? There is difference between conscious eating and like actually changing your habits in the process of doing something, but that shouldn't be associated with dieting. That should be associated with an identity and what I do to maintain my health, maintain my happiness, maintain my energy, like all of these things. So I think at some point, even the things that we focus on in a dieting phase,
Mm-hmm.
we need to dissociate that from the word dieting, because at some point that has nothing to do with your quest of losing body fat, and it's more about your quest of maintaining your equilibrium, your new state, right? So I think just that is an important part of it, to then understanding that the steps has nothing to do with your fat loss anymore. The training has nothing to do with your muscle building, even though it will always give you that if you apply yourself. So I think that's a very important thing to realize, that at some point dieting stops and your life continues with everything that you've done diet wise, except from the calorie balance.
Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of people have never gone through a period of just like maintaining, hence why this culture of like constant diet cycle has always been there since like early 2000s?
I think it will change. I think it will change thanks to coaches like ourselves, where we're actually trying to get people to see things very differently. But I mean, the diet culture has been there for such a long time that it is a conditioning, right? Which is where people believe dieting is a change of, it's a temporary change of life to acquire a goal, whereas dieting for us isn't. Dieting is for us is changing your life, changing your the way that you look at food and nutrition and sleep and steps and all these things. So dieting for us is actually a change of mind, a shift in mindset
Yep.
with some science to get you to the goal, right? So hopefully with time, this is what people will realize, that dieting, it's nothing more than a little bit of science and then a shift in identity.
Yeah. Because a lot of
Um,
people don't. Yeah, it's the whole thing about like it's a quick fix mentality potentially that contributes to all of this as well. Which is like, again, how do you feel about the whole like, you know, I've got a holiday coming up. Can I now diet down for a bit? How do you feel about that? Because there's loads of clients that typically go through that who are probably listening to this right now. They always feel like, if there's a beach holiday coming up, I need to diet down, even though they're not dieted down maybe in like 3 months. They've gone in like a maintenance phase. They want to like diet down again. How do you feel about
I mean, I completely understand it, because we always want to be at our peak when we're going to flank our bodies, right? Like, I know the thought comes into my head.
Yep.
Of course, I'm not going to sit and deny that I go through phases of like, ooh, should I not? And it's not because I'm not happy, and that's the strange thing, because I'm fully happy to go topless now, and that's a good thing. I am. I mean, let's just let's just get them out. No, I'm just kidding.
Go to France.
But there is still always, but this is the nature of human mind, right? That if we can be better, we should be better. And if I am so-called then going to show off, because we show off when we go on holiday, because we do take our clothes off and we go to the beach, then why wouldn't I be at my prime at that given time? But I think that's where we need to just change people's like association to body image and what they believe is acceptable to be looking at. And then understanding that in your head, you're probably never going to look at your best, because we always believe that we can look better, right?
Yeah.
Which is
And
why we
also,
had a discussion about body image in one of our podcasts, and where I also put a post between my bit fuller size and my shredded side, and I got people to vote, and the most people that voted for the preference being in the fuller. And all of those were guys, which then defeated the purpose of like, if I want to be sexier for a man out there and like find my prime mate, then I shouldn't be my shreddest.
yeah.
Right.
And that's fascinating as well, right? Like when you think about like what people really, and it's also, people will never judge you in the beach. If that makes sense. You may think they're judging you. They don't give a crap. They're just, they're walking themselves because
everyone is thinking about their own bodies and their own fucking,
exactly.
I shouldn't have had this.
Everyone's in their own head, right? So I think it's just knowing that, even for yourselves. But like, yeah, the answer, like, don't get me wrong, the short answer to this is definitely no. And I think, look, we've been all guilty of this. I think I can be vulnerable here and say, look, I've gone through this several times. From like, I guess it started from my own fitness journey, where when you're not in like, let's say I was never the skinniest kid or whatever. So like naturally, if you've never been the skinniest kid, you always want to kind of be like, I want to make sure I'm never going back, right? So you're always constantly like, if you feel like you're going a tad up again, you're like, no, I need to go back down. I think that's when, like, for most people in society as well, that's the kind of thinking behind it. Well, it for me it changed because of my identity is probably the best word you can use over here. I know you mentioned it in here as well. It's like you have to change your identity. For me, my identity changed completely. It's like I don't care about like that certain body weight. Of course, like I care about how I look, etc., and so on. But like for me, it's more of a case of like, what does that yield for my performance? How do I feel about this? I can always get shredded once again. For me, getting into like getting abs and all that is the easiest thing for me. Like I generally don't struggle when it comes down to dieting because I've always embraced it. It's always been the after, which is like the muscle building where I've kind of really shunned because naturally you're like, damn, I have to like now, put on more body weight, etc. But for the last 4 years, I've not dieted down. Like last 4 years, I've not dieted down, right? But that took like every summer. I was like, crap. Okay, should I start dieting? Should I start dieting? Like it's even in my own head, I went through it. But every summer I've gone through it, I'm like, okay, no dieting. As soon as September hits, I'm like, okay, I've done it. I've done well, didn't I? From March to September, I'm like, there's always that fight to be like, I think I should start dieting now. But I think you have to go through the process sometimes of just like, you have to say no to yourself in order to then actually learn from it as well. Like if you go through one holiday where you're like, let's say you go to a beach holiday, you don't diet down for it, and you're like, oh, damn, I didn't actually diet down for that beach holiday. It was good. Like I went to 2019, obviously where most people traveled. I went to Thailand. It was a beach holiday. When India, which was not a beachy holiday, but we did go to a beach. I didn't diet down for it, right? And then obviously America was towards the end of the year. I went Hungary as well, where it was like super super hot. Didn't diet down for it. In fact, I was in this like massive pool and stuff like that where everyone goes to in Hungary. I was there, didn't feel anything. Yeah, I was super comfortable with, but it takes time, I think, for most people. But you have to go through a period of just saying no to yourself. Because if you don't say no to yourself, I think it's more of a case of like you'll always crumble. And eventually you're always like, but I think with coaching it helps as well. Because the coaching like will reassure you of like, okay, what's going on here? Like I've had clients now who've not dieted down for a while, post transformation, because they're just like, all right, it's great. I'm not dieting down. Now, I also have a rule, which is like we're not dieting down for at least 6 months. At least 6 months for the future.
But I mean, but then it does tie into how do you manage your post-dieting phase, right?
Yep.
Because if done correctly, you shouldn't have to diet because you should
For at least a year
maintain
or over a year.
you should maintain a really pretty lean physique. Of course, it depends on the level of leanness you got to, but you shouldn't have to. Like I have a guy, he hasn't dieted down for 3 years.
Yeah.
And like we're like maybe next year. Maybe next year. And
there's a rush to it.
but all like, and his dividends paid back in what he has now been able to really just invest in his training over these last 3 years. It's gonna, like, he's almost back to his starting weight where we started dieting him 4 years ago. But
And recon probably looks
he's
different.
looking completely different.
Yep. Yep.
And he's lifting some really serious loads,
Yep.
which doesn't happen if you're starting to deplete yourself every 3 months and you put on 500 grams and then you start the process in your head again and you start to restricting yourself. And then you are stuck in this dieting mentality, which is just never going to give you what you want.
Let's talk about panic dieting, because there's a lot of panic. It's similar to obviously what we're talking about now, but panic dieting in the sense of like you gain like 2 kilos and you're like, I think I should start dieting. A lot of people have gone through that in their lives. Like, have you ever gone through that period where you're like maybe early in your fitness journey, you potentially may have gone through it where you're like, oh crap, I'm at this body weight now. Let me start dieting potentially.
Well, not really. You know, when I was after my first prep, I think we mentioned, but I ended up with an eating disorder, so I was kind of binging on a regular. But I was training like a mad person as well, so obviously that paid dividends as well. It wasn't just fat gained. Out of, I mean, I must have gone from maybe 48-ish kilo to 55, quite quickly, which is, it's a big. It doesn't sound like much, but it's more than 10% body weight.
Yeah, it's over 10%.
So, but say that maybe 1.5 kilos of that was muscle and the rest was fat. But again, it happened quite quickly. But I think I needed to go through that process of just allowing myself to, and also starting to do a lot of personal development and actually working on myself there, because I had issues. But it came to a point when I was about 55, but I realized at that point, like, fucking hell, I feel fantastic. And I was literally training in shorts. Whereas when I came out of this diet, I started training in leggings and like fucking almost long sleeved almost, because I was so scared when I was putting on body fat. And all of a sudden I was at 55, I was having cellulite and fucking, I don't even know, nothing, no definition. And I was fucking proud. And I was like, I feel fantastic. And I had a lot of sex drive and I was strong and I started to focusing on the positive things instead of feeling shit. But I also have this thing, and I don't know why, I don't know where it came from, but if I ever feel like I am confined within my own head, I force myself to push through it. So I didn't want to train with a sports bra on because I didn't feel like I deserved, quote unquote, to be training in a sports bra. But I was like, I listened to that voice and I said, no, no, fuck you, let me go and do it anyway. And then I did it, and then I realized that no one actually watched me, and no one, and then people was like, oh, you look good, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. So then when I started to dieting, it was like it changed my perception of what my body like, because it's all in our head. That's something we just have to realize, that everything that you feel is just in your head, and it's a chosen emotion.
Yeah, it's
So
huge, right? The whole mindset side of things with
yeah.
like everything's in our head. Yeah, it's true.
So whatever you feel, whether you should or should not, it's just a chosen emotion, and you can choose not to. But you have to actually hear and I literally, maybe I sound like a crazy person, but it's like I hear voices. And then I listen to this voice and I would question it, like, well, where does this doubt come from? I would listen to this, where does this confidence come from? And obviously I want to listen into this confidence, and I want to, like, fuck you, limiting belief, fuck you, like this thing that tries to hold me back from being my best version. But I can hear it, and I can question, like, where does it come from, because it's coming from something, and then
Yeah,
I can learn something.
yeah.
But even now, like, don't be wrong, like, I've dieted last year. I dieted just a little bit because I was lean. I stayed lean for a long time after my comp prep and my photo shoots like 3-4 years ago. So I maintained my physique really well. But I still did a tiny diet last year, and now I brought out the kitchen scale and I've tracked for 2 days, and we'll see. Like, I'm not so stressed, but this is the thing as well. I'm not so stressed about being my ultimate physique, which then in my head would have been, you have to be the leanest, but it's not my ultimate physique. If I'm the leanest, I'm actually not my ultimate. So
Yeah.
it's just about, like, understanding that you don't have to keep pushing to the past the point where actually you're happy.
Mm.
but I'm still, like, as I said, like I'm still in the dieting mindset, but I take it very lightly. And also for me, when I start dieting, all I do is to shift gears a little bit. Oh, okay, let me actually make sure that I have more protein. Let me swap out some of my sweets for more broccoli, because I eat a lot of shit. Like, honestly, I do. So for me, when I go into diet mode, it's just cleaning up the diet a little bit. I'm not too bothered about like the specifics. At least it works for me because I've dieted in the past. But if you've never dieted, you might need more specific approaches because you're learning something. Um, so yeah, but yeah, I mean, if someone has done a dieting and they're back and forth into the dieting, we just have to start to question what's actually wrong, because it's nothing to do with your body,
Yeah,
right? Um,
always.
always. And that's the hard journey. That is actually the hard journey, which is why I shift geared in my coaching, because it's like, actually, yes, we can get you science, it's easy. We get you a result, it's easy. But what happens during that? What are you actually learning? Who are you becoming? And that's the hard part. And
Yeah,
people need to be willing to embrace that, you know?
the after diet is one of the hardest for most people, because everyone, for first people, like if they've never gone through fat loss, that's going to be the hardest in that moment. But once you get the blueprint and you understand exactly what's happening on a day-to-day basis, um, the next part of that is really 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 difficult. But if you nail that part down, you've just given yourself like basically license to stay in shape for the rest of your life. And that's priceless, right, for most people, especially because if people have like diseases and there's loads of different things going on, family health and genetic health, whatever. Yeah, that's gonna be priceless for you for the future. And I think it's powerful as well. But yeah, really good episode, covered a lot. If you guys have
But
any
just a
questions,
question: when are you
go
gonna
on.
diet next time?
So I've got my plan is January of
Starting
next year.
January.
Yeah, so photo shoot is next June, July. So we may start either assess January with my coach, and then from there onwards by Feb or March, early March, we're going to start like actual prepping.
Mm.
So it's going to be like 4 years later, basically. So it's going to be good fun.
That would be
Um,
amazing to see
yeah, yeah,
your
yeah. So
progress.
yeah, we'll kind of talk about it live by live each week. I think that'll be good.
Yeah, we'll do like
Um,
live check-ins. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, like,
yeah.
will I cheat on my diet or not? That's
Yeah,
it.
exactly. That would be how we open every
Yeah,
pod.
that'd be actually good, actually, because I think clients will learn how I potentially do it.
Mm.
We'll do a live by live case study. Would be really cool.
Yeah, so thank you so much, guys, for listening in today. We would love to hear some feedback as always, in any way or form. Share this with your best friend and family member, and we will be back, hopefully, the three of us, next week. But we shall see. Until then, goodbye.